Welcome to Power Lunch Live on LinkedIn. I'm Rhett Power, your host. Happy New Year. It's 2020. It's our first show of the year, and I'm delighted to be back after a restful couple of weeks off. I hope you were able to catch some of the best of 2019, some of the best shows of 2019. We had some great shows last year, 120 odd episodes last year. So it's a big year for LinkedIn Live and for us on the program. So it's great to be back. We do the program every Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. Sometimes we throw in a Friday. Sometimes we throw in a Monday. Depends on our guest schedules. But we try to do at least 3 to 4 shows a week, every week at 12 noon. And we got the first one off of the year off on time, amazingly. Anyway, we love doing this show because we get to talk to today's thought leaders, best-selling authors, CEOs, corporate leaders, people who are doing amazing work in the world that we can learn from. That's the whole point of the show, so that we get better at what we do. Now, the fun part of the show is that it can be interactive, but you have to ask your questions for that to happen. So again, that's one of the great things about this platform is you can ask questions of these world-class guests. And we want you to do that so that you can get to what you want to learn. Now, we are simulcasting this on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, and something else, or 1 or 2 other platforms, I think. So that's a fun part of the show as well. So you can catch it on any of those platforms. Now, if you like the program, give it a like or share so that other people in your network can benefit from these conversations. Now, today, I've got Kaihan Krippendorff. He's author of Driving Innovation from Within, a guide for internal entrepreneurs that came out by Columbia University Press. He's got 4 other books, I think, or 3 other books that I think are must-reads. He's a McKinsey alum. He's a recognized world thought leader on strategy and innovation, recognized by Thinkers 50. He's a fellow Thinkers 60 recognized expert. He is just a recognized leader on growth strategy. He's got a consulting firm called Outthinker. Kaihan, hey, welcome to the program.
Hey, thanks for having me, Rhett. Appreciate it.
Well, I wanted to talk about your book because I thought it was a genius to start with. And I think a must read really for all leaders who are trying to think about how to cultivate innovation from within, because as you know, and you talked about in the book, that's where it really comes from, right? It's not, we wouldn't have, as you talked about, we wouldn't have cell phones and other things and the internet and all that other stuff if we didn't have internal innovation in our companies. But I want to define it. What is internal? What is an internal innovator?
Got it. Yeah. So internal innovation or employee-driven innovation is innovation that comes from inside, from an employee. And particularly what I'm interested in, because I think this is really the primary source of innovation, is not innovation that comes out of a formal innovation process or the incubation team or the incubation lab, but really like an employee sees an opportunity, sees a need, thinks the company would benefit from it, and they fight to bring it out into the world and make it real, as opposed to quitting their job and building it as an entrepreneur.
What is are there companies that are doing that really well, that are sort of fostering that kind of internal innovation really well?
Yeah, it's interesting. There are, in my book, I look at the companies that are really outperforming their competition, that are both innovative and outperformers, because sort of like, you can get recognized as being an innovative company by appearing on the Forbes list or the Fortune list or the Fast Company list. But for you to really be doing it well, your innovations need to be getting out into the market, generating revenue and profit. And so what my analysis says is that there are 13 companies that are doing it well. I'm just going to read a few of them here. Some obvious ones, Apple, Netflix, Amazon, a little bit less obvious maybe, Starbucks, MasterCard, Visa. A little less known ones are Naver and Coloplast and Illumina. And Insight, and so these are the companies that are doing it well. And if we look at them, what we see is, with the exception of the pharmaceutical companies on that list, they tend to focus on employee-driven innovation rather than kind of centralized innovation. They have a model of everyone should innovate.
Right. So you bring your supervisor a problem or an issue that you can solve, and boom, they give you the latitude to try to help solve it.
Yes, ideally. But what I have found is that, as I interviewed 150 internal innovators for this book, yeah, what you do find is they don't get permission early on necessarily. They almost never get money early on. So part of the trick is that they find a way to make a little advance, to test something out, to learn from that and do it informally without needing support and permission.
Okay. So it's not coming down from management up top saying, look, if you have employees that bring you solutions to issues, so it's not, I guess my question is, it's not coming down from the top. They're having to push to get recognized, or having to push to get.
I think it's probably both, right? Like there's like, how much does the top ask for innovation, and how much does the bottom up look for innovation? And, you can attack it from both sides. Certainly they're doing a lot of the right things to make it easier for employees to introduce innovation.
Okay.
You got to have like the right culture that encourages innovative thinking, encourages proactivity, encourages customer awareness, allows for risk taking. You got to have organizational structures that give resources and rewards and freedom. So there are some very specific things you can do to enable from the top down, but still, if you don't also activate people so that they want to innovate and they understand what the company needs, then you only have half the equation. I think you need both sides of the equation.
So as a coach, I coach a lot of startups and a lot of companies that are really at the beginning of creating that company culture, right?
Yeah.
How do I talk about innovation that way, right? How do I say, okay, this you've got to build this in early? What does that conversation for me look like, you think?
Yeah, I think you start off by saying, hey, I don't have the ideas. Like, I'm the founder of the company, but don't look for me for the ideas. I need you for the ideas. I think a great case is IKEA. Ingvar Kamprad, he founded IKEA. And, IKEA has revolutionized furniture retailing to a great extent because of the flat pack box. They're the first ones, and still the primary ones that sell furniture in flat boxes. Now, that idea didn't come up in the mind of Ingvar, not the CEO, and it didn't even come up when he founded the company. It was 10 years into the company when he saw an employee, one of the first employees in the company. He was trying to get a table into the back of a car, and it didn't fit. So what did the employee do? He took off the legs, folded them, and slid them into the car. And he went to Ingvar and said, maybe we should do it this way. And that was probably the big idea that propelled them on the path. So I think creating that narrative of, hey, we're going to build a great company together, we're going to change the world, but it's not going to be you executing my ideas. I need your ideas. We need to be generating ideas all the time for how to make this better.
So going back to, you mentioned you had spoken to 150 people, interviewed 150 people for the book. I wanted to ask you, what did you learn? Like, what were the big takeaways from those interviews?
Yeah, I mean, I started off by interviewing. In each interview, asking them.
And who did you interview? Yeah.
I mean, there are some. Well, first of all, I would say these internal innovators are not people that we know, and that's part of the problem. And so they're a little bit hard to find. They're people. I mean, I can tell you the stories, later, as we go along. But the one that really inspired me was a woman named Jean Foual. She is an editor at Macmillan. She is part of the team that signed Harry Potter when the book came to the United States. She's the person behind Goosebumps and Babysitters Club. So her work, or some of her work, but you probably don't know her. And that's kind of the pattern in these internal innovators. She came up with an entirely new way for her employer, Macmillan, to source books by creating a kind of like crowd-sourced platform for would-be self-published authors to submit manuscripts. But what was interesting about it is rather than have them share finished manuscripts, it allows them to share unfinished manuscripts. So these are before they're done. It's like kind of all like pre-publishing, and
Right.
and then they have a big community of readers who then will review the manuscripts and give tips or feedback. They kind of are co-creating it with
Right.
the the author, and it's been written up by CNN, by BBC, by PBS as one of the most radical innovations in publishing. Now, if I mention her name without mentioning what she did, it's people don't know her. And that is a really interesting pattern, is that often this internal innovator doesn't get credit, doesn't get the notoriety for doing it. But one thing that you see, and there's a lot of research that supports this, is that successful internal innovators are more driven by the intrinsic value of innovating. They get a kick out of changing things and making things better. They're less motivated by the fame or the money. So in order to find these people, I basically interviewed someone and said, who else do you think I can talk to? And then that kind of led to a whole number of people that I eventually got to interview.
How do you identify these people in an organization?
Yeah, it's interesting. They're not easy to identify because they don't look like entrepreneurs. They look a little bit different. There's research that shows that they possess 6 characteristics. 3 of them make them look like entrepreneurs. You'll recognize them as being very innovative thinkers. They're kind of people that like to come up with new solutions and start with a blank sheet of paper. They're people who take autonomous action, who don't need to ask for permission, but just see something and do it. And they have a strong market awareness. Like they'll go to the conferences, they talk to customers, they know what's going on. They can have their pulse on the market. Those 3 things will make them look like entrepreneurs. But what's interesting is that there are 3 other characteristics that will make them look very different. So it's going to be hard to spot them in a room if what you're looking for is an entrepreneur. The first is they're not risk takers. They look to create what I call risk asymmetry. They get a kick out of finding situations where they can bet a little in order to get a lot. They're almost like an insurance adjuster, right? The next one is, as I said before, intrinsic motivation. Like you'll notice that they enjoy creating new things, and they don't have to be the person at the front of the room giving the presentation. So if you see an innovation in your company, it'd be interesting to ask, well, where did that idea come from? And you might find the person who handed the idea to someone, who is that first person that handed the baton off, and that is that person. And then the last one is political acumen. That they're very good at politics. In fact, they enjoy the political game. They see the political challenge as part of the problem-solving process. So you'll see them, they'll pick up a phone and open a door and set up a meeting, and they'll kind of be behind the scenes ironing things out patiently in meetings, rather than charging forward with a flag. So those are the characters you're going to look for. Yes, they're a good team player, and they love the company too. I think that's one of the big distinguishers. Is that frustrated would-be internal innovators, they kind of see all the hurdles that the company throws up against them, the bureaucracy, the hierarchy, the culture, as reasons why it can't be done here. Whereas the successful internal innovators kind of, like how to put it. If you were to introduce a product and your customer rejects the product,
right?
Do you blame the customer? No, you shouldn't. You should go learn from the customer. Well, what is it that why did you, what didn't speak to you, and how can I improve how I communicate the product, right? Same thing, your company is a customer. And so you introduce something like the guy that created what is now the famous London tube map. He wanted to redraw the tube map. because the way the tube map was drawn before is that it was geographically accurate from the top, so that like the distance between two stations that are far away are very far apart in the map. And he said, but that's not helpful to someone who's underground. Why don't you draw them all equidistant?
Right.
And they couldn't get their head around. So he drew one and they rejected it. Now, what did he do? He said, okay, let me take their rejections and let me incorporate into design. I'm going to do a new one. And he did this like multiple times until he finally convinced them to try it out. People loved it. They sold out in a day. And now that's the tube map. So viewing the company as a customer and learning from it and adapting is an important kind of mindset of successful internal innovators.
I imagine. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. How do leaders encourage this behavior? I mean, I think one of the challenges, we talked about culture a little bit, but what are some real concrete ways that you can encourage this in a company and actually find these people, right? And help them grow, give them that support that they need.
Yeah. So I think that there are as a leader, there are three drivers you really want to focus on. One of them you mentioned is the talent, finding that talent. And they're not going to look like you, because if you're the leader, if you're the founder of the company, at least you're an entrepreneur, these people are not going to look like entrepreneurs. And so you might want to surround yourself by other entrepreneurs, but you want to look for those people that enjoy the politics, have that intrinsic motivation, take those calculated risks. Culture, there are really four things, behaviors that you need to encourage in culture. Okay. Innovative thinking, autonomous proactivity, market awareness, and the allowance of risk-taking. And so if you look at, say, Netflix, you can see in their cultural statements and their practices, they very specifically encourage those kinds of things. Like they have a phrase in their culture deck, which is no process. If you build a process that is foolproof, it only attracts fools. So they really put on the sleeve the idea that we're going to rethink things, which encourages innovative thinking, right? Market awareness, like, do you get the customer or competition into your market? One friend of mine, Josh Linkner, he had a company, and in order to create that customer and competitive awareness, he created an arch enemy, a fake enemy. I forget what it's called, like Slytherin or something like that. And they would do things like dress in monkey masks and break into the offices and rip everything apart just to make it feel like there's always that competitor there. Or at Amazon, what they do is at meetings, if there's not a customer there, they keep an empty seat at the table, and that represents the customer. And so we should always be thinking as we make our decisions about what would the customer say, right? So there's you can be creative and encourage those four things. Under structure, there are really another four things that the research says that you need. The first is kind of obvious: innovation resources, giving money to allow people to take action on innovation, and giving them time. And you don't need a lot of money. A lot of our clients like this idea of the 5-5-5 experiment, which is in a book called The Innovators Hypothesis.
Okay.
I'll remember the name of the author probably right after this is over. Innovators Hypothesis. And he says, do a 5-5-5 experiment. 5 people, $5,000, 5 weeks, 1 or 2 days a week. Now you've really contained the investment to $5,000, and so but it allows people to take action. Or you can look at Adobe has this Adobe box, and in the box is a gift card for $1,000 that people can spend on anything, plus kind of an instruction manual about how to run experiments, plus some caffeine. So I think it's a gift card for Starbucks, and a sugar. So there's a candy bar, and people who win this competition, they get a box and they can run an experiment. So there's ways of providing innovation resources. And then the other 3 things on structure are rewards. Like, do you reward innovation? Do you celebrate it? I think a very helpful thing is in your agendas, Is your innovation project at the bottom or the top of the agenda? If it's at the bottom of the agenda, we often run out of time and don't get to it. So we want to reward innovation by putting it first. And so we always get to it and celebrate the person that's driving it. Allowing risk taking. So, when people fail, how do you react to that? I've heard Jeff Bezos say, people think that we are risk averse, but actually, that we're risk takers, but actually we take zero risks. Mm-hmm. We take zero risks because every time we fail, we make sure we've learned from it, so it's never a failure. So, when someone fails, do you give them a promotion? Do you congratulate them? Do you recognize them for the learning that they created?
Recognize.
Yeah, right. Recognize it publicly in front of them, in front of other people. Now, what that tells people is like, okay, if I fail, I'm not gonna be punished. Now, you want to make sure that it was a smart risk and that you benefited from it by learning from it. Right. But there are certainly techniques to do that. And the last thing I'd say is that organizational freedom is really important, that our established companies are built in silos. And could your IT people in your IT group, could they collaborate with someone on your sales team and someone in your marketing department on some idea? Or would they have to do that on nights and weekends, right? Do you have a structure that allows that kind of organizational freedom?
Yeah, those silos are killers, man. They really are.
Yeah.
What really you mentioned it earlier, and I wanted to ask you, does that centralized, because I actually had this question that's come up now, where somebody's trying to create this internal sort of shop for innovation. Mm-hmm. Does that centralized innovation work like that?
It works. I think that it is really helpful to have that. The risks are that it will communicate to the people that are not part of it that they should not innovate. Okay. So I think that you want to have multiple models. There's one model. I'll simplify it. So let's say there's a centralized model and there's a decentralized model. I think you need both. And if we look at companies that are succeeding at innovation, they do both. They have that centralized pocket of money team to drive innovations, but they often will get those ideas from everyone. So maybe you allow everyone to come up with ideas. When an idea surfaces that looks interesting, then you pop that into the centralized group. And then you either spin it out or you bring it back in. But allow people who come up with the idea, it's very helpful to allow them to jump into that centralized group and say, okay, that was a great idea, Rhett. If you want it, you can run it. Take a year and a half, take 3 months, and we'll find someone to do your job. You will have your job when you come back, and
run with it.
9 to 5, whatever it is, you can work on that idea as part of the centralized group.
That makes a lot of sense. I like that a lot. That makes maybe it's not practical in every sense, but I get it. How you can make that work.
Yeah, you can make that work. Yeah. I think eventually there'll always be parts of your business that you don't want a lot of change in. I don't know. Operating the oil rig and the safety kind of practices there. You don't want people making it up from scratch every time. But you do want to make sure that everyone feels like they have an opportunity to change things.
Right. No, there's always process improvement. There's always stuff that you can look at. I mean,
yes,
I think that's never going to go away. So I think that's right. Let me check. I've got quite a few things coming in on social media. Thanks, Patricia, Nolan, for your comment. Noel Ferguson, thanks for joining us. Terry Nichols, thanks for being on. Eugene Frazier, thanks, man. This message and delivery is absolutely on point. I feel like he is referencing me as he speaks.
Great.
Awesome show. All right, good. Thank you, Eugene. Terry, let's see. And Lily says, I like the fact that organizational freedom is key where this is such a restrictions, where there's so many restrictions in organization, it kills innovation. We probably both agree with that.
Yeah, but you are starting to see some really interesting models of companies that are overcoming those restrictions. One that I particularly like, and there's some good articles on it. It's called Haier, is a company that manufactures appliances. They're the ones that bought GE Appliance, Chinese company. They have logged 28% profit growth average annually for the last 10 years.
Wow.
And what they assign their success to is that what they did is they took the whole company's hierarchy and they broke it down into what they call micro enterprises, where they have 4,000 little companies, each with a CEO. The CEO is always at risk of getting voted out, because if the team doesn't think the CEO is going to do a good job, they can vote them out and replace them with a different CEO. And then they said, well, what about the finance department and the accounting department, the IT department? They said, well, we should expose them to market forces too, and we'll turn them into micro enterprises. They have to go and get business internally. They have to convince these other micro enterprises to use them. And the micro enterprises, if they don't like the service they're getting from IT, well, they can negotiate with an external vendor. Right. And so it is a platform of thousands of CEOs all running their own company, but they make it work. It's a great case to learn from.
That is so strange.
Yeah.
But unique, definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely thinking outside the box there.
Yeah.
How do you hire innovators? Is there, in your experience, are there ways to look for these characteristics when you hire?
Yeah.
Is there a way to set up a process where you can hire people that are gonna play this kind of role?
Yeah, I think that they're likely to be in your company. And if you look for those 6 attributes and you interview for those 6 attributes that I mentioned, you're likely to find them here. What is, if you don't see them, it's probably because they are not taking action on their ideas. And so in my book, I lay out these, I ask each innovator, what do you see as the big barriers? And there were 7 big barriers that emerged. And so I would look at removing these 7 barriers. So the first is, they spell innovate: intent, need, options, value blockers, act, team, and environment. And intent basically is people have given up innovating. So you can find out why that is, and you can remove that. And there's a way to do that. Need is they don't understand what your company needs, so they innovate in the wrong places. You can solve that by creating a strategy that people can understand. Options is that they don't generate lots and lots of options. There's a way to address that by just encouraging people to come up with lots of bad ideas. Value blockers is that the business idea will be in conflict with the business model that you currently operate, and there are ways to train people to get around those so that they can find a way to alter their idea so that they fit into your business model better. Act is really about creating a space where people can take action on their ideas before proving them, rather than asking them to prove the idea before they can take action. So that 5-5-5 experiment is one great model for that. Then team is, we talked about silos before. Team is allowing people to create cross-functional teams outside of their silos and making sure there's a mechanism in there for that. And then E is environment, which is your organizational environment. And that's where we talked about with the, what the leader can do in terms of putting the right structures, culture, and talent in place. So my answer would be, you could certainly select based off of those 6 attributes. My bet is that they're there. And if you don't see them, it's because you have lost intent. They don't understand the need. They're not generating options. They are stuck on value blockers. They can't take action. They can't pull together a team, or they can't find the right environment. And you can isolate one of those and figure out which one you need to unlock.
I deal with a lot of startups in my coaching, and what I would ask is are these people easy to hire away from their? Because you had talked about that there's a lot of company loyalty. Sorry about that.
Are they easy? Are these people easy to hire away from you or from other people's? What?
So if I'm a startup and I want to build a team
Yep.
with these kind of people,
Yeah. Yeah.
are
I
they
got
easy to hire away?
you. I think. Okay. Well, first I'll say there is this idea, kind of like there are the different phases of your evolution, right? I love this metaphor, and it's that you need the Marines to take the beach. You need the Army to take the beachhead. You need the Army to take the country,
Right.
and you need the police to police the country.
Okay.
These people will be particularly helpful after you've taken the beach. They will get a little freaked out, not knowing what product we're going to offer to what customer. After you've figured out that product market fit, you got a customer and they're growing, right? Then I would bring them in as part of the Army.
Okay. So you're building that.
Building that, right?
Building the police force.
Rebuilding, exactly. And I think that the main thing to look for is at that stage you find startups are often like torn between, do I hire the really successful person from Google? I don't know, because they're used to working in a huge environment, and if they come here but they don't have the resources they have there, I don't know if they're going to perform or not. Right. But if we hire another Marine, they're going to keep breaking things, right? So if you can find that ex-Googler or what big company, person who's worked in a big company that's not that big as Google, but the size of company that you want to be next. Mm-hmm. But within that, you look for the person who is the innovator and they rethink things and is proactive. I think that's the most key thing. Is they're kind of in large companies. Let's say we could divide everyone else between they execute well what they're told, or they challenge and they act with autonomy. It's really important that you find these people that act with autonomy. So I guess when you interview them, I'm just making this up now, would be asked for, provide me examples of when you fixed a process, when you were told one thing and you knew there was a better way and you did it, something like that.
Yeah, I always want to hire people that are hungry too, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, I think there's a characteristic of these people that really they do want the stability. I see what you're saying there. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. At the same time, they want to make an impact.
Yes. Right? Yes.
I think if you present it that, I think if you're hiring for that,
yes,
you'll probably find these kind of people.
Yes, yeah, you're spot on. And you hear these successful internal innovators talk about this all the time. It's like, here I get a chance to impact the world at scale. Right. And I've got Heather Davis is one of the people that I mentioned in my book. She's a good friend of mine, former client, and she was at TIAA, and she was part of a group that had $25 billion in agricultural real estate. So they own more farms than any private owner of farms in the United States, more wineries, more soybean, more orchards. She recognized this business issue, which was that the farms were having difficulty finding workers because there was a change in immigration law. And so she went, and this is one thing you'll see these innovators do, is they don't solve the problem at their desk. They get out of the office. I think Steve Blank says something like, there are no answers in your office. You got to get out of the office. The answers are out there. So she goes out there. She goes to an orchard and she sees what's going on. She recognizes the kind of work they need done in orchards is really tough, heavy work. It's repetitive. You don't have a lot of human contact. Now, her son has autism. And so she makes the connection that this is the perfect kind of work to be done by people with autism. So she introduces this innovation, which is a social program called Fruits of Employment that helps people with autism find work on farms. Now, if she were just an entrepreneur, I'm going to say just an entrepreneur, but if she weren't doing it on this platform, she'd have to go and convince lots of farms. But they own more farms than anyone else. They can just turn it on. And so, like, for her to help these people not just get jobs on farms, but they get a driver's license. They have their own spending money. They got something on their resume. They get out into the world. Like, the impact that she could have by doing that on this big platform, that is what inspires her, right? So there's that is like kind of the hunger that you're looking for. You said it right. They want to make a difference, but they get to do it at scale because they're doing it in an established company.
Yeah, that makes sense to me.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this. This is sort of the last question I always ask somebody. Well, you know what? Actually, I want to ask you about barriers real quick. What are the barriers that frustrate
Yep.
internal innovators?
Yeah. So, I laid out those 7 things before:
Right.
intent, need, options, value blockers, act,
Mhm.
team, and environment. But if I were to say which one is the big one, it's value blockers. And that is, you often hear people talk about innovation antibodies.
Right.
Like,
Right.
come with an idea here, and then now what we want to appreciate is that although there are value blockers, although there are complications with doing something inside an established company, because all right, you come up with the idea, and the people that you want to sell it to may not be the people that your salespeople currently have relationships with. The way you want to price it is not the way that you price. The process that you want to use to make it is not the process that you currently have, right? It creates these value blockers. Now, what I show in my book is that despite these value blockers, 70% of society's most transformative innovations have come from employees. That
Wow.
means if it were not for employee innovators, you would not be able to get a stent if you got sick, or an MRI. Our solar energy would be far less efficient. You would not have the internet. Everything's built on the internet. That came from employees. So
Yeah.
it's not that it's not difficult, but these value blockers can be overcome. So if you just shift and say, these value blockers, our salespeople don't visit my current customers, are just another problem to solve, and break that down. For example, well, what if I change the product so it is more useful to the customers that our salespeople currently visit, right?
Yeah. Right.
That's the kind of thinking that is really critical to take in order to break these down. In my book, I lay out these like 8 different types of value blockers. So I would say that of these 7 barriers, that's the one that is most often cited.
Most office. Okay.
Yeah.
So the last question I always ask is, what's the best advice you ever got, and from who?
Wow. Wow. I have still not fully acted on this advice.
Okay.
Okay, I would say it's actually the worst advice I got that I've later learned from. Okay, so I graduated from college, and I was talking to a relative, an older relative. I won't name his or her name, and she said, do whatever you want, but whatever you do, don't go into sales.
Okay.
And so I listened to that advice, and like I did something else, and there was this cool company that I could have done that was a little more salesy. It was like, and I've always regretted that I accepted the advice and didn't decide, and it could be sales, it could be something else, right? But what I think it speaks to is that there's always something to learn, and the way to learn it is to try something you're uncomfortable with and learn how to do it. The companies that win, the people that win, that they just learn faster. Like Vern Harnish says,
Yeah.
outlearn your competition. And I think at the end of the day, it all comes down to that.
Yeah, I actually like that. I'd rather learn faster than anybody else than try to outwork somebody, right?
Yeah. But if you do both, yes, exactly.
Well, this has been great. This has been a great conversation. The book is called Driving Innovation from Within, a guide for internal entrepreneurs. I'm guessing you can get it. We'll put a link to the Amazon page. But do they have a website somewhere else where they can get it?
Yeah, you can go to kaihan.net, KAIHAN.net, and there you can see the book and other stuff of mine.
Okay, great. And we'll get to if there are other questions that came in, we'll get to those. I'll get to those right after the program. Okay. But anyway, thank you so much. We've got a great lineup coming up this week and next. We've got Stephen and Maura Klemick. We've got Ron McCullough. Next week, we're going to be live from San Diego. We've got a Marshall Goldsmith 100 Coaches event, and I'll be talking to several fellow MG 100 coaches live from San Diego. But we'll also have a few other shows early in the week. But anyway, thank you for joining us. You can look at the upcoming schedule at powerlunch.live. And thank you for spending a Tuesday morning or afternoon, depending on where you are, with us here on Power Lunch Live.